Hello, down in Argentina at the NEO TV Lab. This is Henry Jenkins speaking to you from the Annenberg Innovation Lab at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. The lab here has been dedicating a lot of time to thinking about questions of media engagement, new producers, new screens, and particularly transmedia storytelling. So it's an appropriate location to be speaking to you from today. I wish I could be there in person. I was asked to reflect a little bit about transmedia and where it's been and where it's going. The term, as I defined it, I picked up the phrase transmedia from Marcia Kinder's work, Playing with Power, in my book, Convergence Culture, and tried to define it in terms of the systematic dispersal of bits of media content across multiple media systems, with the purposes of creating some kind of systemic unified experience. What we were trying to push back on was the idea of simply redundancy, that is telling the same story over and over again on different media platforms, and the idea of sort of just wild variations, stories that were contradictory, that didn't really add up to anything meaningful or whole. What we've seen, when I wrote the chapter in Convergence Culture, we were looking at The Matrix as a franchise. We've since seen many, many examples of mass entertainment franchises which have used film, games, comics, television. Today we might think about the Marvel franchises, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Avengers, and so forth, as being spectacular examples of that side of it. But we're also seeing this idea take off globally through different kinds of media producers. Even here in the United States, people are making a distinction between the West Coast model, which is the Hollywood model, and the East Coast model, which is more alternate reality games, independent content, small pieces of media, none of which dominate in the sense of the mothership. But we also are seeing transmedia take off in media systems that have more of a public service economy. So we can see it in the Canadian Film Board embracing this. We can see various European production systems embrace transmedia. And there the focus has tended to be less maybe on entertainment, more on arts, more on culture, education, documentary. All of those models are becoming more and more prevalent around the world. We can see transmedia is tied to the media mix system of Japan, which in many ways influenced what we in the United States have been doing. And we're seeing, as we look to the South, the emergence of distinctly Latin American forms of transmedia that may come from telenovela, that may come from some of the musical performance traditions in Brazil, that often, because of the hybrid nature of Latin American economies, often mix grassroots and top-down forms of production, the Creative Commons cultures that have thrived in some of the countries of Latin America, that often mix public service and commercially oriented forms of production. As we look at these new systems, we're seeing the emergence of other kinds of transmedia logics and practices. So we're seeing not only transmedia storytelling and entertainment, but transmedia branding as it comes through the advertising industry. We're seeing transmedia education and learning. We're seeing transmedia documentary and journalism. We're seeing transmedia activism. All of these become ways of using this core idea of taking pieces of media, spreading them across the landscape, taking advantages of the affordances of different media platforms. All of those are different ways of building out the concept of transmedia. Now, the last point I'll make is that transmedia is often discussed in terms of digital media. That may be where the most spectacular change has taken place, but it can involve any mixture of media. So I've often used the example of Rio, where there is a strong tradition of samba schools and carnival, where there's street performers, and where there's sand sculpture on the beaches, where there's a vibrant graffiti culture. You could have a story, an icon in Brazilian folk culture that spreads across all of those media and would be by definition transmedia. What this also means, though, is as new technologies come in, Google Glass, other kinds of virtual reality, head-mounted displays, 3D printing, all of those become potential tools for transmedia storytellers to further expand our experience of the stories, the information, the news, the causes which they want to use transmedia to communicate. So the future of transmedia will be we will have many futures of transmedia. It's not just one future. It will be global in its perspective, and it will involve many different media platforms and practices, from those of the streets to those of the corporate boardroom.